are in listen-only mode.
Well, good morning. We're going to begin our presentation. I'd like to welcome you all to the What to Expect During Your Stage 1 Audit webinar. My name is Joseph Krolikowski, and I'm the Technical Director and a member of the Executive Committee for Perry Johnson Registrars. Couple of notes for everybody. All of our participants are on mute, but we absolutely would like to address your questions, so please use the question portion of the dashboard, and we will take questions at the conclusion of the presentation. I'll also note that copies of our presentation will be available for download shortly after we're finished. And this webinar and all other past PGR webinars will be made available for reviewing on our website under the previously recorded webinars page. Our presentation for today is going to cover the following topics. We're going to discuss why the audit is done in two stages, the initial certification audit. We'll take you through the process beginning at quotation. We'll talk about what happens prior to the Stage 1 itself. We'll discuss the Stage 1 audit front to back. We'll discuss some key things that can prevent continuance to a Stage 2 audit. We'll have some ideas on responding to recommendations and overall readiness for the Stage 2. We'll have some concluding remarks and then your questions. Now, as to why certification audits are done in two stages, the simple answer is we do it that way because we are required to. PGR is held accountable to a number of requirements as a certification body. These include requirements that are found in ISO 17021. Now, that standard includes a clause that reads, "The initial certification audit of a management system shall be conducted in two stages, Stage 1 and Stage 2. Now, the intent behind that approach is to ensure that only those companies that are truly prepared for their certification assessment will be permitted to complete the full audit. If you dial the clock back to the days before we had a two-stage process, there were a number of companies that would attempt to go for what was then referred to as a registration audit. And an auditor would show up and the organization would have nothing in place. And that was a waste of the auditor's time, a waste of auditor resources. And so it was felt that this process would be better served by being done in two phases. So hence the two-stage requirement. Now, the Stage 1 audit begins with the quotation phase. Obviously, you must be a PGR contracted client before we can do a Stage 1 audit at your facility. And we begin our process with a series of application documents, and they're varied by scope. We have one for ISO 9001, we have one for ISO 14001, and so forth. And those documents are referred to as the F1 series. And the F1 serves a number of purposes, but part of what it is intended to help us do is to gather some information in advance so that we can give you a more effective audit. So the F1 series of documents, they're detailed, but as I said, they're intended to help facilitate a smoother audit. The more information that we can gather, we can be more competitive in our quotation. We can also be advised in advance of any logistical challenges or readiness issues. For example, if you tell us in your F1 that you have multiple sites, or if you have a very large geographic area, these are all things that can represent challenges in terms of completing the Stage 1 and in ensuring that everything is reviewed. Now, one thing that we like to share with our new clients is that there is a set of rules that we have to follow in terms of audit time. These come from the International Accreditation Forum, or IAF. and their mandatory document 5, or MD5. Now, MD5 is a binding document for all certification bodies. It's actually available for viewing right on the IAF website. We are permitted to discount a certain time, but only up to 30%. And if you have a competitor that is saying, okay, based on these numbers, I can discount you this much and so forth, be careful about that, because we try to apply as much discretion and discounting as we can. We want to be competitive too, but we have to be sure that we're meeting all of the applicable requirements, including MD5. Now, once you're under contract, you will be assigned to an audit program coordinator. You'll probably come to know this person as your scheduler. And the scheduler should be thought of as your primary point of contact here at PJR. They are going to service any needs that you have. You're going to get to know them quite well. Think of them as cradle-to-grave client management. Now, the schedulers, among many other duties that they have, they are required to assign an auditor that is qualified in your standard and competent in your technical area. So, for example, if you are a construction firm, we would have to be sure that we send an auditor who has attained competency in construction. Whether through experience or by study or what have you. So we have a couple of things that we have to fulfill when we are assigning an auditor. Now, obviously, the more specialized the standard, once we get past ISO 9001 and start getting into standards like ISO 14001 or R2 or IATF 16949, this gets more challenging for us to find a suitable auditor. Obviously, we want to try to assign someone that's close by as well. We're certainly sensitive to travel expense and what have you, but the scheduler's primary concern is the auditor qualified in the standard, and are they competent in the technical area? Obviously, you want someone to show up for the audit that knows a thing or two about your business and can go right into the process of adding value through the audit process. Now, in addition, the schedulers are going to send you what we refer to as an F108, and that's another document that we have numbers of those depending on the sector. The F108 is it's attesting to your readiness prior to the Stage 1 audit, and it's an official statement that yes, everything is in place and we are ready for a Stage 1 assessment. So let's talk a little bit more about the F108 and what are some of the things that you're committing to. There's a number of things on the F108, and these are all drawn from the applicable standards, as well as what ISO 17021 says we are required to review during the Stage 1 process itself. So what are some of those things? Well, first of all, obviously your scope. Have you determined the scope of your system? Have you considered your exclusions or exemptions? Do you know what your processes are? Have you determined how those processes interact with each other? Have you determined your process measures? Do you have performance data for those process measures? Have you prepared PJR form F191, which we'll be talking about a little bit later? Have you completed an internal audit? Do you have competency records for your internal auditors? Have you completed a management review? Have you applied control to any processes that are outsourced? Have you determined what the applicable statutory and regulatory requirements are? And do you have the required documentation in place? And of course, that varies quite a bit depending on the standard. Let's talk a little bit more about this F191. This has been a very confusing document for a number of our clients, and I want to try to break down some of that confusion and simplify it for you. The F-191 is intended to help you ensure that the processes you've established are going to fulfill all of the applicable clauses of the standard. It's also, again, an item that we are going to use to plan for the Stage 1 audit and for the audits beyond the Stage 1. It's an official rendering of what are your processes and how do they apply to the clause numbers of the standard. So let's take a look at an example of how this is going to get put together. So let's say that we were issued an interaction of processes, and this is what's given to us by the client. Now you'll note in the left-hand side here there are 6 named processes: sales, order entry, purchasing, production, shipping, quality, and support. And we say to our client, well, okay, these are your processes as you understand them. How do these processes interface with the requirements of the standard? So taking those 6 processes into account, let's now organize them on the F-191. Okay, so you'll note on the left-hand side we've got those same 6 processes, and across the grid here you'll note that each of these processes has some representation in the standard. In some cases it's just a few clauses. Purchasing, you'll note, shows up in just 2 places. Production shows up in several. Support is just about everywhere. You'll also note this particular company apparently is exempting the design requirements in section 8.3. There's no assigned tick marks for any of the processes there. This organization, through its 6 processes, has addressed the requirements of the standard. This is an appropriately prepared F-191. Now, when we complete the Stage 1 audit itself, when the Stage 1 audit is all set, we've got all of the pre-audit documentation, we are ready now to do the Stage 1 audit. Decision has to be made if we're talking about an ISO 9001 audit, and that is, will the Stage 1 audit be done on-site or off-site? And with ISO 9001, we do have the option of doing the audit off-site. Now, where that is the case, there is obviously a savings in travel cost, but there is more total on-site time. And the reason for that is the Stage 1 audit is not officially complete until the auditor shows up for the Stage 2 audit and follows up on anything that's been raised as a concern during the audit process. All other scopes, the Stage 1 audits are mandatorily done on-site. Now, before the auditor arrives, you should be contacted by the auditor at least a few days in advance, and you should receive an audit plan. And it is important for you to confirm that what's on the audit plan is correct, and let your auditor know if it isn't. You know, if you get an audit plan and you're not recognizing the processes that are being called out, if you get an audit plan and you're concerned about the amount of time that's been devoted to one particular topic or another, or if the address information is wrong, that's very important. We want to make sure that the auditor's going to the right place. So do make a point of reviewing that audit plan carefully when you receive it. Now, once the audit begins, of course, like all audits, the Stage 1 audit will commence with an opening meeting. This is an excellent chance for you to confirm any last-minute changes, make sure that the auditor is aware of any critical information. Are you going to be having any visitors that day? Are there going to be people that will be available in the morning but not in the afternoon, or vice versa? All good things to share with your auditor. From the opening meeting, the Stage 1 audit will proceed in accordance with the auditor's plan. And the auditor will use a PJR Stage 1 workbook to record the results of their assessments. Now, obviously in the Stage 1 audit, nearly everything that's reviewed is documentation based in nature. They're looking at a variety of topics. And anything that is reviewed is going to result in one of two conclusions. Either the item conforms or there is a concern. And concern is defined as pretty much anything that represents a disconnect between the implemented process and the related requirements from the applicable standard. Now, once the auditor has completed their review, they will need some time, usually, to prepare their report. And the report is really the only output from the Stage 1 audit, the Stage 1 report and the Stage 2 audit plan. There are no nonconformances that are issued in a Stage 1 audit. So the report is what you have to work from in terms of preparing for the Stage 2 audit. Once the report is complete, the auditor will lead a closing meeting to discuss the results, give you a chance to ask some questions, and will result in one of a few possible outcomes. You'll either be recommended to continue to the Stage 2 with no concerns. You'll recommend to continue to Stage 2 with some concerns that will be followed up on. That's actually the most common outcome. Or in some cases, it'll be recommended that you repeat the Stage 1 audit. You'll be asked to sign an acknowledgement of the results, and you'll be given a copy of the completed report. Now, in certain cases, if the auditor has travel circumstances or what have you, it may be a few additional days before you receive the actual report, but in most cases, the auditor should be able to prepare it on site during the Stage 1 audit itself. So let's talk a little bit about things that can prevent continuance to a Stage 2 audit, or things that would need to be resolved. One of the more common is an inadequate or inappropriate interaction of processes. And there's a number of ways that this might come up. If you give us an interaction of processes, or IOP, that resembles the Plan, Do, Check, Act diagram from the standard, or if you hand us something that appears to be canned that you've gotten from a consultant, it's not necessarily going to be rejected out of hand, but it's going to raise concerns. We need to see that you have documented an interaction that is unique to your organization. It needs to be reflective of what your processes are. Now, we've actually put together a special webinar on this topic called The Interaction of Processes and Its Importance to a Successful Audit. That's just on this topic. I do encourage you to watch it. The interaction of processes is the single best indicator of your understanding of the process approach that is described in ISO 9001. So accordingly, we really pay very close attention to the IOP during the Stage 1 audit. Another item that can prevent continuance to a Stage 2 audit is inadequate process measurables or process performance data. Now, both of the current versions of ISO 9001, that's 2008 or 2015, require that you monitor, measure where applicable, and analyze your processes. So every process on your interaction should be monitored or measured, and there should be performance data available to prove that you are doing this monitoring or measurement. Now, some of the standards that we certify to have requirements for the amount of data that's got to be available. For example, TS 16949 requires a year's worth of performance data. Now, for other standards, we have to have enough evidence to confirm that the process has been implemented. So there is no magic number, for example, for ISO 9001, but we need to feel confident that the measures are established and performance data is being gathered. Now, some of our clients choose to have just a few measures of effectiveness. that cover all processes. That's considered acceptable as well. But this is a very important item, and in terms of things that have prevented companies from continuing to stage 2, this is absolutely the most common issue that has come up. Another concern could be an inadequate internal audit. So what are we looking for an adequate internal audit? Well, we're going to look to see that internal audits have been planned. We're going to look to see that notes were prepared, that reports were prepared, showing that all of your processes and related requirements were audited. Oftentimes the notes that we see are very limited, so that's going to raise concerns. We're going to want to see any nonconformances that have been discovered, and we're going to want to confirm that you've responded to those nonconformances. Obviously, we want to make sure that auditors aren't auditing their own work. Now, if we do the stage 1 audit and you've not yet performed the internal audit, or you've only done part of the internal audit, we can still recommend that you continue to stage 2 if we can confirm that there is a plan in place to ensure that the internal audit will be completed prior to stage 2. So in other words, if it's been planned, we'll still accept it. Now obviously, by going that route, you lose the benefit of an auditor's assessment of your internal audit process prior to continuing to the stage 2. Now with auditor competency records, organizations are required to determine what it means to be competent to be an internal auditor. But we're going to question what was the methodology that you applied, and have you confirmed that methodology was upheld for all of your internal auditors. So whether that means they're going to internal auditor training, if they're doing internal study, whatever the decided approach was, we need to confirm that it was followed. Now some of the scopes that we certify have additional requirements for internal auditor competency, and obviously when those are in play, we will uphold those requirements as well. Another area that can raise concerns and prevent continuance to the stage 2 audit is management review. Again, we're going to be looking to see that all requirements were upheld. One thing that we'll share is a lot of our clients, they'll use PowerPoint slides for management review. That's great, but remember that we need to see management review outputs too. We need to see decisions and actions and conclusions and so forth. And the slides may not always reflect that. So pay attention that you're meeting the output requirements too. Now in a similar way to the internal audit, if we have evidence that the management review is incomplete but planned, again, we can recommend continuance to the stage 2, but you lose the benefit of us reviewing the management review prior to the stage 2. Now, one thing to bear in mind with a stage 1 audit, and this is true of any audit that PJR performs, all conclusions are subject to executive committee concurrence. The auditor's recommendations are just that, recommendations. So we do review all stage 1 audit reports to make sure that the decisions reached are appropriate and fair. Now if you as a client disagree with the conclusion that's been reached by your auditor or a member of the executive committee, you do have the right to issue a dispute or even appeal such a decision. And I would direct you to review our Pro 10 procedure for details on how that's done. That Pro 10 is available anytime on our website. Now, if the recommendation is made to repeat the stage 1 audit, obviously you need to work from the audit report to shore up all of the issues that were raised during the stage 1 audit. And we do encourage you to keep in contact with your auditor and with us to discuss your remediation efforts and make sure that you're on the right path to a better result during the next Stage 1 audit. If the recommendation is to proceed to Stage 2, ideally, there will be a minimum of 30 days between the Stage 1 and Stage 2. And better to have even more time, 60 to 75 days. Remember, we do have a 21-day cancellation policy where you will be responsible for travel cancellation costs. When we've had clients that have scheduled their Stage 1 and Stage 2 audits back to back, more often than not it leads to trouble where we have a severe issue that means we cannot continue to the Stage 2 audit. We have to deal with cancellation expense and so forth. And we encourage you to use that time between the Stage 1 and Stage 2 audit to fix those areas of concern. Get them all taken care of, because anything from a Stage 1 audit that is still delinquent at Stage 2 is going to likely result in a nonconformance. And now it's an official nonconformance and you have to issue a systemic corrective action, and it becomes a much more involved issue for you than it would have been to simply respond to the Stage 1 audit concern. In conclusion, PJR wants our clients to feel confident and comfortable with the Stage 1 audit process. The care that's been taken in the pre-Stage 1 phase and the mutual support of your auditor and the PJR Executive Committee and team are intended to help make this process as seamless as possible. We wish you every success in your certification journey. I'd like to invite you to tune in for one of our other webinars, ISO 9001 2015, Approaching Your Transition with Confidence. Will be premiering in June of 2017. This is a brand new updated webinar providing an in-depth review of the ISO 9001 2015 standard, as well as feedback from PJR's first full year of auditing ISO 9001 2015, as well as lessons that have been learned from the newly published ISO 9002 guidance standard. I also earlier mentioned the interaction of processes and its importance to a successful audit webinar. That one is shown on a semi-monthly basis, explores the crucial topic of processes and how to correctly understand them. And we offer a variety of webinars on other topics, including ISO 13485, IATF 16949, and ISO 14001-2015. I'd like to invite you to let us keep in touch with you, and you can do that by opting in. If you visit our website at www.pjr.com, at the bottom of the page, if you enter your email address and click subscribe, you'll be automatically inputted into our database. We send out news updates, information on upcoming webinars, and other points of interest. I do thank you for your attention and time. I will be unlocking the question dashboard, and we'll see if we have any questions today. Okay, we have a question from Wilbert Vivas. I do hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. There is not an explicit requirement for documenting processes and interaction in ISO 9001 2015. What would be the criteria to ask this in an audit? Well, the commonly utilized requirement for this, Wilbert, there's a couple of places where it's alluded to. In 4.4, it talks about the organization determining the processes needed and their application throughout the organization. And then in a subclause there, under 4.4.2, it says that the organization shall maintain documented information to support the operation of its processes. The commonly accepted interpretation of that clause is that we need to see that the processes have been determined and their interactions have been determined. And as a certification body, it's also our right and our prerogative to require certain items as part of the audit planning process. Any further questions? John Higgins asks, is there a specific AS9100D webinar available? Yes, indeed. Please visit our website and you should see a listing of available webinars in AS9100D, including those that have been provided in the past. James Shaw asks, this is our first ISO 9001 2015 audit. Is it a stage 1? James, if you're already certified, no, it would not be a stage 1 audit. Larry Whitaker asks, when are we required to upgrade to ISO 9001 2015 and 14001 2015? The cutoff for transitions will be in May of next year. James Shaw asks, is stage 1 for next year? Again, James, if you are already certified, you would be transitioning based on either your recertification date or your next surveillance date. Patricia Baker asks, is there a stage 1 and stage 2 audit for ISO 9001 if you already have 9001-2008 registration? No, you would be permitted to complete your transition as part of a surveillance audit or recertification audit. You would not be required to complete a stage 1 audit simply to transition to the new standard. Any further questions today? Chrysolita Almeida asks, is there an ISO 9001 2015 webinar available? Yes, indeed. We have webinars on ISO 9001 2015 just about every month. Please visit our website for further information. Leslie Shepard asks, can you explain more in detail about competency for internal auditors? Yes, I can. Again, remember that competency is for the organization to determine, and accordingly we are going to ask, what requirements did you determine for internal auditor competency, and did you fulfill those requirements? So there's a lot of ways that that can be fulfilled, but we need to feel assured that you determined which approach worked best for you. Jessica Picard asks, is a pre-assessment the same as a stage 1? No, it is not. A pre-assessment is a very limited review of your quality system with much less documentation. Ted Pena asks, if I'm already certified to ISO 9001-2008, is it a requirement to get a stage 2 audit to convert? No, it is not. You would transition as part of either a surveillance or a recertification audit. William Fingston asks, has PGR seen a decline in clientele due to the new standard? Are companies dropping certification? William, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. I'll discuss that with you offline. Thank you. Carlos Ospino asks, are there in-room classes for ISO transition? Carlos, at this time, we are only offering virtual training. We will let you know if we decide to offer in-person training pertaining to the new standard. Paul Smith asks if the material we've just reviewed is available for download. It will be shortly after we're finished. Any further questions? Okay, thank you all for your time and have a good day.